Alright, let's dive into one of the strangest and most elusive species in the Warhammer 40k galaxy, the Hrud. These shadow-dwelling beings are wrapped in an air of mystery, their very existence shrouded in myths and half-whispered rumors. If you've heard of them, it's probably through fragmented reports or terrified accounts from those unfortunate enough to encounter them. Even within the vast imperium of man, where knowledge of countless xeno-species is collected and catalogued, the Hrud remain an enigma, a race so elusive that their true nature is still hotly debated by xenobiologists and imperial scholars alike. What little is known about the Hrud paints a picture of a species that defies simple classification. They are not just another minor Xenos race lurking in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. The Hrud are something else entirely, a living paradox, a species that thrives in the shadows, leaving only decay and entropy in their wake. They are as much a force of nature as they are a civilization, their very presence capable of warping the physical world around them. Stories of their migrations describe whole planets falling into ruin, their inhabitants aging and decaying within weeks as the Hrud pass through. It's as if their very existence is an affront to the natural order, a walking reminder that all things, even empires, must eventually decay. But what truly sets the Hrud apart is the deep, unsettling mystery surrounding their origins. Unlike the Orcs or the Aldari, who have well-documented histories stretching back millions of years, the Hrud seem to have appeared from nowhere, slipping through the cracks of the galaxy like the shadows they are known to inhabit. Some believe they are simply a forgotten race, one of countless species that emerged in the chaotic aftermath of the Old One's fall. Others whisper that they are the remnants of something much older, a fragment of a long-dead empire that once ruled the stars, now reduced to scavengers and raiders hiding in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. So, could the Hrud really be the last remnants of a forgotten empire? It's a provocative question, one that challenges everything we think we know about them. After all, in a galaxy as ancient and war-torn as the one in Warhammer 40k, there is always the possibility that the truth is far stranger than the myths. And if there is even a sliver of truth to these whispers, it would make the Hrud not just another Xenos threat, but a living reminder of a lost age, a species whose very existence is a testament to the rise and fall of forgotten empires. The origins of the Hrud are one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Warhammer 40k universe. They are a race that seems almost deliberately forgotten, their history erased or perhaps simply lost in the swirling chaos of galactic time. But there are whispers, scattered fragments of forgotten lore that suggest the Hrud might not just be scavengers or shadowy nomads lurking on the fringes of human space. Instead, they could be the remnants of a once great empire, a civilization that rose to power in the distant past only to fall into obscurity, its legacy reduced to little more than the desperate whispers of survivors hiding from the relentless tides of history. Some theories suggest that the Hrud might have once been part of a much older and more advanced culture, one that predated even the rise of the Aldari or the early stirrings of humanity's ancestors. After all, the galaxy is ancient beyond human comprehension, its stars and worlds bearing the scars of countless wars and forgotten empires. It is possible, perhaps even likely, that the Hrud are survivors of one such civilization, a people who once built great cities and crafted technologies that would seem like magic to those who now walk the galaxy. Consider the strange, almost otherworldly nature of the Hrud's physiology. Their ability to distort time and accelerate the decay of their surroundings is not something typically seen in a primitive or purely survival-oriented species. Instead, it suggests a race that once wielded power over the very fabric of reality, a power that might have been developed in a distant age when their kind ruled over vast star systems. It's tempting to imagine the Hrud as the last remnants of a species that once strode the galaxy as masters, their technology so advanced that it blurred the line between science and sorcery. Perhaps their shadowy nature and their fear of light are not just survival traits, but echoes of an ancient culture that once thrived in the twilight between realities. Some fan theories even go so far as to speculate that the Hrud might have been one of the many servant races of the Old Ones, the godlike beings who shaped the early galaxy and whose wars with the Necrons and Catan reshaped reality itself. It's a tantalizing possibility, one that would explain the Hrud's strange connection to time and entropy. Perhaps they were once the chosen servants of these ancient masters, granted the ability to manipulate the flow of time as a gift or a weapon against their enemies. And when the Old Ones fell, when the stars themselves burned with the fury of the war in heaven, perhaps the Hrud were left behind, their masters shattered and their civilization reduced to ruins. Of course, this is all speculation. The true history of the Hrud may be far more complex, or perhaps even stranger than we can imagine. But there is something about the way they move through the galaxy, the way they cling to the shadows and shun the light, that speaks of a species with a long and haunted past. They are not just scavengers or parasites, but survivors of a forgotten age, a people whose very nature is shaped by the echoes of a long-dead empire. It's a chilling thought, one that adds a new layer of fear to the Hrud's already unsettling reputation. Because if this theory is true, then every time the Hrud emerge from the shadows to prey on the living, they are not just acting as mindless predators, but as the last desperate remnants of a fallen empire, a ghostly echo of a time when their kind ruled the stars. When we start looking at the scattered remains of ancient worlds, it's hard not to wonder if some of the ruins left behind might be connected to the Hrud. While they are not a species known for building vast monuments or leaving grand architectural legacies like the Eldari or the Necrons, there are hints scattered throughout the galaxy that they might have once been more than just a nomadic, shadow-dwelling people. Some of the oldest ruins in the galaxy, those half-buried beneath the sands of forgotten worlds or hidden in the depths of uncharted space, bear strange, twisted designs that defy easy classification. These structures, often warped and crumbling, seem to twist away from the light as if recoiling from the very concept of permanence. One of the more intriguing pieces of evidence comes from a world in the Segmentum Obscurus, a dead planet known to the Mechanicus as D67 Theta. This world, forgotten by nearly every other race in the galaxy, is littered with bizarre skeletal ruins that seem to decay faster than the stone and metal around them. Some tech priests have suggested that the structures here might have been built using some form of molecular destabilization, a technology that sounds suspiciously like the Hrud's notorious entropic fields. If this is true, it could be a significant clue, a sign that the Hrud once had the power to shape entire worlds before their fall from power. There are also the curious, almost spectral artifacts occasionally found on worlds known to have been overrun by Hrud swarms. These objects, often covered in strange, twisting script that resists translation, seem to pulse with a dark energy even after countless millennia. Some inquisitors who have studied these artifacts claim that they bear the hallmarks of a long-dead empire, one that once mastered technologies far beyond those of the modern Imperium. One such artifact, discovered on a derelict space hulk drifting near the Eye of Terror, was said to emit a low, unsettling hum, as if it were alive or at least aware of its surroundings. The team that recovered it did not survive long, their bodies found drained of life and their equipment rapidly decaying, as if time itself had turned against them. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the lost colony world of Mycara. Once a thriving human settlement, the planet was abandoned after a Hrud migration swept through its habdomes, leaving the colony's infrastructure crumbling within weeks. Yet, buried beneath the collapsed structures, archaeologists found the remains of a much older city, its architecture unlike anything seen before. The twisting corridors and shadow-filled chambers seemed designed not for humans or even Aldari, but for something that shunned light and embraced the darkness. Some have speculated that these ruins might be remnants of an ancient Hrud city, perhaps even a forgotten capital where their kind once ruled over a vast and fearsome domain. Of course, it's possible that all of this is mere coincidence, that these ruins and artifacts belong to other, even older species now lost to time. But it's hard to ignore the eerie similarities, the sense of decay and entropy that clings to these places, as if they bear the scars of a civilization that long ago fell into darkness. It's a tantalizing thought that the Hrud were once masters of their own empire, now reduced to little more than shadows and whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy. It makes you wonder what might still be out there, buried beneath the sands of forgotten worlds or drifting through the cold void, silent witnesses to a time when the Hrud were something far more powerful than the scuttling scavengers we know today. When it comes to the Hrud, myths and legends are often all we have to work with. Their secretive nature and the way they slip through the shadows of history have made them the subject of countless stories, some whispered by fearful Imperial guardsmen around dying campfires, others preserved in the half-forgotten records of alien species with far longer memories than our own. These tales paint a picture of a race that has always existed on the fringes of reality, a species so ancient and elusive that even their name is spoken in hushed tones, as if uttering it might somehow draw their attention. One of the most persistent myths about the Hrud is that they were once a mighty and feared people, a race whose empire stretched across the stars before it was shattered in some ancient galaxy-spanning cataclysm. Some versions of this story claim that the Hrud were once the chosen servants of the Old Ones, the godlike beings who shaped the early galaxy and fought bitterly against the Necrons and their Catan masters. According to this theory, the Hrud were granted their strange powers over time and entropy as a gift or perhaps a weapon, a way to strike at the seemingly immortal Necrons and weaken their relentless metallic legions. If true, this would make the Hrud one of the oldest species still wandering the galaxy, their twisted forms and strange abilities the result of countless eons of adaptation and decay. Another theory suggests that the Hrud were once the rulers of a vast and powerful empire that spanned multiple star systems, a culture known for its mastery of time-manipulating technologies and dark, esoteric sciences. Some claim that the Hrud's ability to accelerate decay and disrupt the flow of time is a remnant of this ancient knowledge, a power once wielded by their greatest warlords and sorcerers to bend the very fabric of reality to their will. This idea is supported by the scattered, almost spectral artifacts sometimes found in the aftermath of Hrud migrations, objects that seem to warp and decay even as they are touched, as if still clinging to the last echoes of a long-dead empire. Then there are the darker, more unsettling legends, the ones that speak of the Hrud as something far worse than mere scavengers or survivors. In the sagas of certain Aeldari exodite worlds, there are tales of shadowy figures that crept through the ruins of their ancestors' shattered cities, spreading decay and corruption with every step. These beings, known in their tongue as the Kane's Bane, were said to be drawn to places of death and ruin, feeding on the life force of the fallen and leaving only ash and dust in their wake. Some Aeldari seers even claim that these creatures were responsible for the fall of entire craft worlds, their twisted energies rotting away the very spirit stones meant to preserve Aeldari souls for eternity. Even the Necrons, beings who themselves are ancient beyond comprehension, speak in their cold, mechanical tongues of a time when they battled a race that wielded the power of entropy like a blade. Some cryptex, the mad scientists of the Necron dynasties, whisper of the Shadowkin, a species that once plagued their empire with time-warping weapons and reality-bending technologies. If this is true, then the Hrud may have once been a true power in the galaxy, a race capable of challenging even the Necrons in their prime. Of course, these are just stories, fragments of half-remembered legends passed down through the ages by species whose own histories are often shrouded in mystery. But the fact that so many different races, each with their own perspectives and grudges, all share similar tales of the Hrud, suggests that there might be some grain of truth buried within these myths. Perhaps the Hrud really were once the lords of a forgotten empire, their shadowy forms and entropic powers a testament to a lost age when they ruled the stars. Or maybe they are something even older and more terrible, a force of pure decay that has always existed on the fringes of the galaxy, waiting for their chance to consume everything in their path. When you start looking at the Hrud through the lens of other ancient civilizations, the picture gets even more interesting. The galaxy is littered with the ruins of forgotten empires, each with its own unique blend of technology, philosophy, and culture. And while the Hrud don't often come up in the same breath as the Necrontyre or the Aldari, there are some fascinating parallels if you're willing to dig deep enough into the lore. First, consider the Necrontyre. Before they became the soulless Necrons, this ancient race was a deeply bitter and resentful people, their lives defined by short lifespans and a constant seething hatred for the Old Ones and their more vibrant creations. Some fans have speculated that the Hrud might share a similar origin story, a once thriving species whose hatred and despair eventually twisted them into their current form. It's possible that the Hrud, like the Necrontyre, once walked the stars as a proud and powerful race, only to fall into darkness and decay as their empire crumbled. There's also the matter of their shared connection to entropy and decay. The Necrontyre, after all, were the ones who struck a bargain with the Catan, becoming the undying Necrons in exchange for a form of immortality that cost them their very souls. The Hrud, with their strange entropic fields and ability to accelerate the decay of matter, might be the remnants of a similar pact, a species that chose a dark path in a desperate bid for survival, only to pay a terrible price in the process. Some theories even suggest that the Hrud might have once been allies, or even servants of the Khitan, their bodies twisted and corrupted by the same star-eating entities that now command the Necron legions. It's a chilling thought, but one that would certainly explain the Hrud's eerie connection to entropy and their almost instinctive hatred for the living. Then there's the Aldari. Unlike the Necrontyre, the Aldari were once the undisputed masters of the galaxy, a race of artists, warriors, and psychically gifted beings whose empire stretched from one end of the galaxy to the other. The Hrud, by contrast, are a scattered and decaying people, seemingly the polar opposite of the Aldari in every conceivable way. But what if this was not always the case? Some ancient Aldari texts make vague references to shadowy figures that haunted the edges of their empire, beings that crept through the webway and spread corruption wherever they went. These shadows in the dark were said to be capable of bending time and space to their will, their very presence capable of rotting flesh and withering bone. It's not a perfect match, but it's hard to ignore the similarities, especially when you consider the Hrud's ability to manipulate time and their almost instinctive aversion to light. There's also the curious case of the Old Ones. This ancient godlike species is believed to have created many of the galaxy's early races, including the Aldari and possibly even the Orcs. If the Hrud are indeed remnants of a forgotten empire, it's possible that they were once another creation of the Old Ones, a species designed to act as shock troops or scouts in the endless wars against the Necrons and their Citan masters. This would explain the Hrud's seemingly instinctive connection to entropy and decay, as well as their ability to slip through time and space like ghosts. Perhaps the Hrud were once part of a grander plan, a living weapon designed to break the will of the Necrons and spread chaos throughout their empire. And when the Old Ones fell, when their great works were shattered and their creations scattered to the winds, perhaps the Hrud were left behind, reduced to little more than scavengers and survivors, their once great civilization a distant memory. Of course, this is all speculation, but the idea that the Hrud might share a common origin with some of the galaxy's most ancient and powerful races is a tantalizing one, a theory that adds a whole new layer of mystery to their already unsettling nature. Because if this theory is even partly true, it means that the Hrud are not just scavengers or parasites, but the twisted remnants of a long-dead empire, a people whose history is as old and as dark as the galaxy itself. The Old Night, or the Age of Strife as it's more commonly known, was one of the darkest and most chaotic periods in galactic history. It was a time when the warp storms that raged across the galaxy isolated countless worlds, cutting off entire star systems from each other and plunging once great civilizations into chaos and ruin. For many species, it was a time of great suffering and loss, a period when the light of reason flickered and nearly went out. For the Hrud, however, it might have been something even worse, a turning point that forever changed the course of their civilization, pushing them into the shadows and transforming them into the scavengers and raiders we know today. Imagine, for a moment, a Hrud civilization that had once been something far greater, perhaps even a small but thriving empire, with its own cities, technologies, and starships. It's not as far-fetched as it might seem. After all, the Hrud have displayed a remarkable technological aptitude in the past, using strange, almost arcane devices that seem to warp the very fabric of reality. It's possible that, before the storms came, the Hrud were a more open and organized people, a species that moved through the stars with purpose rather than simply drifting through the darkness like shadows. But then came the Old Night, a time when the very laws of reality seemed to break down. Warp storms raged across the galaxy, cutting off trade routes and isolating worlds for centuries at a time. For the Hrud, a species already inclined toward the shadows and skilled at avoiding direct conflict, this must have been a nightmare. Trapped on their own worlds, cut off from the broader galaxy, their once great cities likely crumbled into ruin as their society fractured into countless scattered tribes. Without the ability to maintain their technologies or rebuild their infrastructure, they would have been forced to retreat into the darkness, becoming the scavengers and raiders we know today. Worse still, the warp itself might have twisted them, changing their very nature over the centuries. It's known that prolonged exposure to the warp can have a profound effect on living beings, warping their bodies and minds in ways that defy logic. Perhaps the Hrud, trapped in the shadow of these storms for countless generations, began to take on the very qualities of the darkness they had once only used as a weapon. Their strange entropic fields, their unnatural connection to time and decay. These might all be the result of millennia spent hiding from the madness of the warp, their bodies and minds slowly adapting to a reality where the laws of physics are little more than suggestions. And then there's the question of survival. During the Age of Strife, countless species were wiped out, their home world scoured clean by Xenos raiders, human warlords, and the horrors that slipped through the cracks of reality as the warp storms grew in strength. For the Hrud, survival would have required a complete shift in tactics. No longer able to rely on their once great cities or fleets, they would have had to become masters of stealth and ambush, adapting to a life in the shadows where direct confrontation was a death sentence. It's possible that this is when the Hrud truly became what they are today, a species of shadowy nomads, slipping through the cracks of history and feeding on the decay of dying worlds. Of course, it's hard to say for certain. The Hrud are a deeply secretive species, and their history is one of constant adaptation and survival in the face of overwhelming odds. But it's tempting to imagine that the Old Night, that great dark age that shattered so many empires, might have also shattered the Hrud's once great civilization, reducing them to the scattered, shadow-haunted creatures they are today. And if that's true, then the Hrud are not just another Xenos species, but a living reminder of a time when the galaxy itself nearly fell into darkness, a species whose very existence is a testament to the horrors of the Old Night. Understanding the internal structure of Hrud society is like trying to piece together a puzzle when half the pieces are missing and the rest are hidden in the shadows. It's not that the Hrud are simply chaotic or disorganized, far from it. Despite their seemingly scattered and nomadic nature, there is a certain grim order to the way they operate, a sense of hierarchy and purpose that hints at a deeper, more ancient social structure. In many ways, the Hrud are like the ghosts of a once great civilization, their modern communities shaped by the echoes of a forgotten past. One of the most striking aspects of Hrud society is their tendency to form tight-knit, insular groups known as warrens. These communities, often hidden in the depths of abandoned starships or the forgotten underhives of long-dead cities, function more like clans than simple gatherings of individuals. Each warren is a self-contained society, ruled by a hierarchy of elders and spiritual leaders who guide their kin through the darkness of their twilight existence. It's tempting to see these warrens as the last remnants of a once great civilization, their customs and rituals echoes of a time when the Hrud might have ruled entire worlds rather than simply scavenging among the ruins of others. There is also a strong sense of tradition among the Hrud, a cultural memory that seems to stretch back far beyond the rise of the Imperium. Many Hrud groups are known to venerate their ancestors, keeping careful track of their lineage through complex genealogies and whispered tales passed down through generations. This respect for the past, this almost obsessive focus on ancestry and tradition, suggests that the Hrud were once a more stable, unified people, their current fragmented state a tragic reflection of their fall from power. It's a chilling thought that each warren might be the last flickering spark of a once great empire, its members clinging desperately to the rituals and customs of a long-dead age. Then there's the question of leadership. While the Hrud don't seem to have the rigid military-style command structures of the Imperium or the complex, caste-based hierarchies of the Tau, there is a certain order to their chaos. Elders, often the oldest and most cunning members of a warren, hold a position of great respect within Hrud society, their words treated as near sacred by the younger generations. These elders, their bodies twisted and withered by centuries of exposure to their own entropic fields, serve as both spiritual leaders and warlords, guiding their kin in times of war and overseeing the dark rituals that sustain their race. It's possible that these elders are the last echoes of a long-forgotten ruling class, their once great power reduced to little more than the desperate whisperings of creatures that have been forced to retreat into the shadows. Of course, there are also the mysterious seers and shamans who wield the strange, reality-bending powers that seem to come so naturally to the Hrud. These individuals, often treated with a mixture of fear and reverence by their kin, are believed to have a direct connection to the entropic forces that define their species, their minds twisted by the same dark energies that warp their bodies. It's tempting to see these seers as the last remnants of an ancient priesthood, their abilities the final flickering echoes of a time when the Hrud might have commanded powers beyond the understanding of the modern galaxy. It's also worth noting that the Hrud seem to have a deep, almost instinctive aversion to direct confrontation, preferring to strike from the shadows and retreat before their enemies can mount a proper defense. This isn't just a survival tactic, it's a way of life, a philosophy that seems deeply ingrained in their culture. It's possible that this too is a holdover from a forgotten age, a relic of a time when the Hrud might have fought far greater foes and learned the hard way that the best way to survive is to avoid a fair fight at all costs. In the end, it's hard to say for certain what the Hrud once were or what their society might have looked like in its prime. But the hints are there, scattered throughout their culture like the shattered pieces of a broken empire. The elders who rule their warrens, the seers who bend reality with a thought, the strange, almost ritualistic way they cling to the shadows and shun the light. It's as if the Hrud are constantly looking back, their every action a desperate attempt to reclaim the power and purpose they lost so long ago. The technology of the Hrud is one of the most mysterious and unsettling aspects of their existence. For a species that lives in the shadows, seemingly clinging to the edges of extinction, the Hrud possess some truly terrifying and advanced weaponry, artifacts that hint at a far more sophisticated past. Unlike the crude, brute force technology of the orcs or the sleek, hyper-refined crafts of the Eldari, Hrud technology has a dark, almost organic quality to it, as if their machines have somehow absorbed the decay and entropy that surrounds their creators. One of the most infamous examples of Hrud weaponry is the dreaded Hrud Fusel. At first glance, it looks like a twisted, corroded relic, a weapon barely held together by scraps of metal and twisted wires. But appearances can be deceiving. In the hands of a Hrud warrior, this weapon becomes a thing of pure horror, capable of reducing flesh and metal to ash in the blink of an eye. The Hrud Fusel doesn't just kill, it ages its target, accelerating the passage of time within a localized field and reducing even the mightiest warriors to little more than dust and echoes. There's something profoundly unsettling about a weapon that can bypass the laws of physics so casually, as if the Hrud have found a way to twist the very fabric of reality to their will. What makes this technology even more terrifying is that it seems to draw on the same entropic energy that defines the Hrud themselves. Some tech priests believe that the Hrud fusel is not just a weapon, but a glimpse into a far more advanced understanding of time and decay, a technology so ancient and powerful that it has become indistinguishable from sorcery. It's the kind of weapon you'd expect from a species that once ruled the stars, a dark echo of a time when the Hrud might have been far more than just scavengers and raiders. And it's not just their weapons that hint at a forgotten age of technological mastery. The Hrud are also known to use strange, shifting armor that seems to flicker in and out of existence as they move, their forms becoming little more than blurred shadows in the darkness. This technology, sometimes referred to as Hrud cloaking, is believed to be a form of phase field manipulation, a way of bending light and time to create the illusion of invisibility. It's a chilling reminder that the Hrud are not just mindless predators, but a species capable of truly advanced engineering, a people who, despite their current state, still possess the knowledge to craft technologies that defy the understanding of the modern Imperium. Then there are the even stranger artifacts, the ones that seem to defy all attempts at analysis. These objects, often found in the aftermath of Hrud migrations, seem to pulse with a dark, otherworldly energy, their surfaces covered in twisting organic patterns that seem to writhe and shift when viewed out of the corner of one's eye. Some have speculated that these artifacts might be remnants of a far more advanced culture, the last traces of a lost empire that once commanded the power to shape reality itself. It's a disturbing thought that the Hrud might still be clinging to the scraps of a technology that once allowed them to walk as gods among the stars. Even their methods of travel hint at a far more advanced past. While the Hrud are often described as nomads, drifting from world to world like shadows, there are scattered reports of Hrud vessels slipping through the cracks of real space as if they were ghosts, their ships seemingly immune to the laws of time and distance that bind lesser species. Some believe that this ability to slip between realities is a remnant of the Hrud's forgotten empire, a technology that once allowed them to traverse the galaxy with the ease of the Eldari or the Necrons, but which has now become little more than a desperate survival tool, a means of fleeing the horrors of a galaxy that has long since forgotten their name. Of course, this is all speculation. The Hrud are masters of deception, a species that thrives on the fear and confusion of their enemies, and it's possible that their technology is simply the result of millennia spent scavenging the wreckage of other, more advanced races. But there's something about the way they fight, the way they move through the shadows and strike from the darkness, that suggests a species with a far deeper understanding of the universe than most are willing to admit. Perhaps, in the end, the Hrud are not just the remnants of a forgotten empire, but the survivors of a civilization that once grasped the secrets of time itself, a people whose weapons and technology are not just tools, but the echoes of a lost age when they ruled the stars. The behavior and way of life of the Hrud are as strange and unsettling as the creatures themselves. To most who encounter them, the Hrud seem like little more than skittering shadows, furtive and scavenging, their twisted forms creeping through the darkness of forgotten worlds and abandoned space hulks. But there's a deeper, almost tragic side to their nature, a set of behaviors that hint at a people struggling to survive in a galaxy that has long since passed them by. One of the most striking aspects of Hrud behavior is their instinctive need to avoid the light. It's a trait that goes beyond mere preference, almost as if the light itself is somehow toxic to them. This aversion to light, combined with their natural talent for stealth and ambush, has led many to view the Hrud as nothing more than cunning predators, a race that thrives in the shadows and preys on the weak. But what if this behavior is not just a survival instinct, but a holdover from a time when the Hrud were something far more than scavengers? Some theorists have suggested that the Hrud's aversion to light might be a side effect of their entropic nature, a consequence of the same strange energy that allows them to accelerate decay and twist the flow of time around them. It's possible that their shadowy forms are not just a product of their biology, but a reflection of their ancient past, a time when they wielded powers that defied the laws of physics and bent reality itself to their will. Perhaps in those long-forgotten days, the Hrud lived in cities where the very light of the stars was bent and twisted to serve their needs, their cities shrouded in eternal twilight as they manipulated time and entropy like a painter works with oil and canvas. There's also the matter of their diet. The Hrud are known to consume almost anything organic, their digestive systems capable of breaking down even the most toxic and decayed material into usable energy. This might seem like a purely practical adaptation, a way for a nomadic species to survive in the harsh environments they often inhabit, but it also hints at a darker, more unsettling truth. Perhaps the Hrud's ability to feed on decay and rot is not just a survival mechanism, but a reflection of their own slow, inevitable decline. A species that has become so entwined with the concept of entropy that it can only survive by consuming the dead and the dying. Then there's their sense of community. Despite their fearsome reputation as raiders and scavengers, the Hrud are actually a deeply social species, their warrens bound together by a complex web of familial ties and shared traditions. This sense of loyalty to one's kin, this almost obsessive focus on lineage and ancestry, suggests that the Hrud once had a far more structured and unified society, a people who built great cities and ruled vast territories before the fall of their empire shattered their civilization and scattered their tribes across the galaxy. Even their strange whispering language, a series of clicks, hisses, and guttural tones that seem to echo through the shadows, speaks to a people who once had a much more complex and organized culture. It's a language that seems almost designed for secrecy, each phrase carrying layers of meaning that are nearly impossible for outsiders to decipher. It's tempting to imagine the Hrud as the last remnants of a once great civilization, their language a haunting echo of a time when their kind ruled the stars and their words carried the weight of empires. Finally, there's the Hrud's almost pathological need to avoid direct conflict. Unlike the orcs or the Tyranids who thrive on the chaos of battle, the Hrud seem to view direct combat as a last resort, preferring to strike from the shadows and retreat before their enemies can respond. This isn't just a matter of survival. It's a deeply ingrained part of their culture, a philosophy that seems to have been passed down through countless generations. It's as if the Hrud have learned, through bitter experience, that the only way to survive in a galaxy filled with gods, monsters, and superhuman warriors is to become a living ghost, a shadow that slips through the cracks of history and leaves nothing but whispers in its wake. In the end, it's hard to say what the Hrud once were or what they might become if their scattered tribes were ever to reunite. But there's a sense of tragedy to their existence, a feeling that the Hrud are not just another Xenos threat, but a people struggling to survive in a galaxy that has long since forgotten their name. A species that clings to the shadows, not just out of fear, but out of a desperate need to remember what they once were. The relationship between the Hrud and the warp is one of the most unsettling aspects of their existence. For a species so deeply rooted in entropy and decay, it's almost inevitable that they would have a connection to the chaotic, ever-shifting tides of the immaterium. But unlike the Eldari, who wield the power of the warp like a blade, or the Psykers of the Imperium, who draw upon its energies with often catastrophic results, the Hrud's relationship with the warp seems far more subtle, more instinctive, and perhaps even more ancient. Some theories suggest that the Hrud are not just affected by the warp, but are actually shaped by it, their very biology twisted by its unpredictable energies. It's a chilling thought, but one that makes a certain kind of sense. After all, the Hrud are known for their unnatural ability to distort time and accelerate decay, traits that are more often associated with the chaotic energies of the warp than with any natural biological process. It's possible that the Hrud, like the shambling horrors of Nurgle's plague legions, have become so entwined with the raw power of entropy that their very bodies have been transformed, their forms bent and twisted by centuries of exposure to the raw, unfiltered madness of the immaterium. There are even some who believe that the Hrud might have once been a species of latent psychers, their minds naturally attuned to the swirling energies of the warp in a way that modern humanity can only dream of. If this is true, it would explain a lot: their strange ability to bend time, their seemingly supernatural knack for slipping through the cracks of reality, and their instinctive avoidance of light, which is often seen as a symbol of order and stability in a galaxy defined by chaos and decay. It's a haunting image, the idea of a species that once walked the stars as living conduits for the warp, only to be reduced to twisted scavengers by the slow, inevitable decay of their ancient empire. There's also the question of how the Hrud travel. While they lack the massive, warp-powered ships of the Imperium or the elegant webway-spanning craft of the Eldari, the Hrud have still managed to spread across the galaxy, their shadowy forms slipping through the cracks of real space like ghosts. Some have suggested that the Hrud might possess a unique form of warp travel, a way of bending space and time to their will without the need for cumbersome ships or complex navigational systems. It's a disturbing thought that the Hrud might be able to slip between the cracks of reality itself, their migrations following the shifting tides of the immaterium, like flocks of carrion birds drawn to the scent of death. Then there's the question of their influence on the worlds they pass through. The Hrud are known for their devastating migrations, their very presence capable of reducing entire cities to ruin in a matter of weeks. This isn't just the result of their entropic nature, but something deeper, something more primal. It's almost as if the Hrud are able to draw upon the energies of the warp itself, their twisted forms acting as conduits for the raw, unfiltered chaos of the immaterium. Some have even suggested that the Hrud might be a kind of living warp storm, their bodies and minds so saturated with the energies of the warp that they carry its corrupting influence with them wherever they go. Of course, this is all just theory. The Hrud are a deeply secretive species, and their relationship with the warp is as much a mystery as their origins. But there are enough hints, enough scattered fragments of lore to suggest that the Hrud are far more than just scavengers and raiders, that they might, in fact, be one of the oldest and most deeply corrupted species in the galaxy, a people whose very existence has been twisted and shaped by the raw, unfiltered chaos of the immaterium. And if that's true, then the Hrud are not just another Xenos threat, but a living reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows of the galaxy, a species that has become so deeply entwined with the warp that they have become something more, and perhaps far more dangerous, than the sum of their parts. The Hrud are often considered nothing more than elusive, barely understood Xenos that lurk in the dark corners of the galaxy, but their presence is far more widespread than most would believe. Despite their nomadic and elusive nature, the Hrud have left a trail of destruction and decay across countless worlds, a grim testament to their continued presence and possibly their far more ancient past. It's as if they're haunting the galaxy, slipping through the cracks of real space and leaving behind nothing but whispers and ruins. One of the most intriguing aspects of Hrud sightings is their sheer unpredictability. They have been reported on worlds as varied as the hive cities of the Imperium, ancient Eldari ruins, and even the fringes of Necron tomb worlds. This nomadic nature suggests that the Hrud aren't just wandering aimlessly, but are following some ancient instinctual pattern, like a species whose migration routes were once vital to a long-dead empire. It's a haunting thought that the Hrud might still be retracing the paths they once took when their civilization was at its height, visiting ancient sites that hold some forgotten significance to their kind. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the world of Necromunda, where entire sections of the Underhive have been abandoned due to Hrud infestations. These areas, once teeming with life and industry, now lie rotting and decayed, as if the Hrud's presence has sucked the very life from the air. It's not just the physical decay that's disturbing, it's the sense of loss as if something far older and darker has seeped into the bones of the place. Some of the locals whisper that the Hrud are not just scavengers, but the remnants of a people who once ruled over worlds like Necromunda, their ancient infrastructure now buried under countless layers of industrial grime. There are also stories from rogue traders and explorers who have encountered what they believe to be ancient Hrud relics on distant worlds. These artifacts, often covered in twisting patterns and etched with indecipherable symbols, seem to pulsate with a faint, eerie glow. One particularly notorious example is the so-called Black Star Idol, a grotesque statue found aboard a derelict ship drifting near the Maelstrom. The crew that recovered it claimed to hear whispers in their minds, and within days, their flesh began to wither as if touched by the hands of time itself. Inquisitors who later studied the artifact suggested it might be a relic from an ancient Hrud temple, a piece of their lost culture that somehow survived the ages. It's terrifying to think that the Hrud might still cling to such objects, carrying fragments of their forgotten past as they scuttle from world to world. Another fascinating clue lies in the scattered ruins of the Aldari maiden world of Iorvas. The Aldari fled this world long ago, driven out by a sudden, overwhelming wave of entropy that rotted even the wraithbone structures they had so painstakingly crafted. Those who later investigated found strange, fibrous growths covering the once beautiful landscapes, their tendrils pulsing faintly in the twilight. Some speculate that this decay was caused by a massive Hrud migration, a wandering swarm that overwhelmed the planet and left nothing but death in its wake. If this is true, it could mean that the Hrud have far more destructive potential than most realize, capable of reducing even the most resilient ecosystems to dust. But it's not just the decay that's unsettling. It's the way the Hrud seem to appear and disappear without warning, as if they're moving through hidden pathways that other species can't perceive. Some Imperial scholars believe that the Hrud might be utilizing some form of temporal displacement, allowing them to move through time as well as space. This would explain how they seem to vanish after their migrations, leaving nothing behind but ruins and a sense of profound loss. If they truly are remnants of a once great empire, perhaps they're still following ancient rituals and paths, retracing their long-forgotten dominion across the stars. It's even more unnerving when you consider the idea that the Hrud might be intentionally seeking out places tied to their old empire, revisiting the remnants of what once was, like spectral echoes of a people who refuse to let go of their past. Maybe they're not just scavengers, maybe they're pilgrims, returning to sites that hold spiritual or historical significance to their kind. This would paint the Hrud not just as opportunistic raiders, but as a race struggling to reconnect with their own fragmented history, desperately trying to piece together the ruins of their long-lost civilization. It's a dark, almost tragic thought that the Hrud are not just hiding from the galaxy, but from the ghosts of their own past. Perhaps their migrations are not just about survival, but a quest to rediscover their lost identity, to find meaning in a universe that has long since forgotten them. And if that's the case, it means that every ruin they haunt, every city they infest, might just be another step in their endless search for a purpose that was lost to them eons ago. So, after all this, the question remains: could the Hrud really be the remnants of a forgotten empire, a once proud civilization now reduced to shadows and whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy? It's a haunting thought, one that adds a whole new layer of tragedy to a species already defined by decay and decline. If the Hrud really are the last remnants of an ancient empire, then they are not just scavengers and parasites, but survivors, a people clinging to the fragments of their past as the galaxy moves on without them. It's tempting to imagine the Hrud as the last survivors of a once mighty race, their culture and technology slowly crumbling under the weight of time and entropy. Perhaps their strange reality-warping powers are not just a quirk of their biology, but the remnants of a technology so advanced that it has become indistinguishable from sorcery. Maybe their shadowy migrations are not just acts of desperation, but the last flickering echoes of a people who once ruled the stars, their every step a desperate attempt to reclaim the glory they have lost. Of course, it's just as possible that the Hrud are something far stranger, a species that has always existed on the fringes of reality, a living embodiment of decay and entropy that has outlasted countless empires without ever truly belonging to any of them. Maybe they are not the remnants of a forgotten empire, but something far older and more fundamental, a force of nature that has haunted the galaxy since the dawn of time, slipping through the cracks of history and feeding on the ruins of those who came before. While the Hrud themselves remain a shadowy mystery, one aspect of their existence that often goes overlooked is their potential impact on the broader history of the galaxy. If the Hrud really are the remnants of a forgotten empire, then their presence could have influenced countless other species over the millennia, shaping the course of entire civilizations without anyone ever realizing it. It's a chilling thought that the Hrud might be more than just scavengers and raiders, but silent architects of the galaxy's darkest chapters, a force that has subtly guided the fates of entire worlds from the shadows. Consider, for example, the impact of Hrud migrations on human worlds during the Dark Age of Technology and the Age of Strife. These were times of chaos and isolation when humanity's once great interstellar empire was shattered by warp storms and internal strife. It's possible that the Hrud, drawn to the decay and entropy of these collapsing human colonies, might have played a far greater role in the fall of humanity's first great empire than anyone realizes. After all, the Hrud are known to spread decay wherever they go, their very presence accelerating the passage of time and reducing entire cities to ruins in a matter of weeks. Perhaps the reason so few records survive from this dark period is not just because of the warp storms, but because the Hrud themselves were there, silently erasing the past as they crept through the ruins of humanity's greatest achievements. Then there's the question of their influence on the Eldari. It's no secret that the Eldari have long been haunted by shadows, both literally and metaphorically, and the Hrud might be part of that darkness. There are whispers among certain Eldari Exodite clans that their ancestors once fought a great war against a race of shadowy beings who spread corruption and decay wherever they went. These shadows in the dark were said to be able to slip through the cracks of reality itself, their very presence capable of corrupting the wraithbone structures that the Eldari hold so dear. It's a terrifying thought that the Hrud might have once been a true rival to the Eldari, their ancient empire clashing with the glittering spires of the Eldari's maiden worlds in a conflict that has long since been forgotten by all but the most ancient seers. And what about the Necrons? It's often assumed that the Necrons and their Satan masters were the only real threat to the Old Ones during the war in heaven, but what if the Hrud were also part of that ancient conflict? Some cryptex whisper of a time when the Necrontyre fought not just against the Old Ones, but against a shadowy race that seemed to slip through the cracks of reality itself, their very presence accelerating the decay of even the Necrontyr's near-indestructible living metal. If this is true, it would mean that the Hrud have been a part of the galaxy's history for far longer than anyone realizes, a shadowy force that has haunted the Necrons from the very beginning of their long, bitter war against the Old Ones. Even the Orcs, a species not known for their long memories or deep historical knowledge, have legends of shadowy figures that creep through the dark corners of their camps, stealing their best weapons and leaving nothing but rust and dust in their wake. It's easy to dismiss this as just another Orc superstition, but what if it's true? What if the Hrud have been preying on the Orcs for millennia, slipping into their strongholds under the cover of darkness and sabotaging their war machines before they can be unleashed upon the galaxy? And finally, there's the matter of the Imperium itself. For all their faith in the Emperor and their unshakable belief in humanity's manifest destiny, the people of the Imperium have always had a deep, primal fear of the dark. Perhaps this fear is not just a product of superstition, but a deeply ingrained racial memory, a leftover instinct from a time when the first human settlers in the galaxy lived in constant fear of shadowy predators that crept through the darkness and drained the life from their colonies. It's a haunting image that the Hrud might be the original nightmare, a species so deeply entwined with the concept of decay and entropy that their presence still haunts the collective subconscious of humanity itself. In the end, it's hard to say just how much of an impact the Hrud have had on the galaxy. They are a species defined by secrecy and shadows, a people who have spent millennia slipping through the cracks of history and feeding on the ruins of greater civilizations. But the hints are there, scattered throughout the lore of countless races, the whispered tales of shadowy figures that creep through the darkness, the rusting ruins of ancient worlds, and the flickering, half-forgotten memories of a time when the stars themselves trembled at the approach of the Hrud. It's a terrifying thought that the Hrud might not just be the remnants of a forgotten empire, but the ghosts of a time when the galaxy itself was a far darker and more terrifying place. But whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the Hrud are far more than they appear, a species whose very existence is a reminder of the countless empires that have risen and fallen in the dark corners of the galaxy. They are a living testament to the power of entropy, a people who have survived against all odds, clinging to the shadows even as the light of civilization flickers and fades around them. And if you've enjoyed this dive into the shadowy history of the Hrud, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of the Warhammer 40K universe. From forgotten empires to the darkest corners of the warp, there's always another secret waiting to be uncovered. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay vigilant. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows.